Hi all, let's have a look at another very interesting game of pool Keres from the 1950 USSR Championship. So why was he called the uncrowned king of chess? Well, this game is, I think, a fantastic game. We'll see. Now, knight f3 from Salomon Flohr. We have a symmetrical English to start off with. b6, bishop g2, bishop b7, castles e6, knight c3. Looks pretty standard so far, except here after d4. Usually nowadays c takes d is by far and away the most popular move in the position, but there is an interesting alternative, knight e4. It has been played a few times and it's on Livebook as a recognized move. Queen c2, so we have knight takes c3, queen takes c3, now bishop f6 pinning that pawn, bishop e3, and now knight c6, putting more pressure on d4, rook ad1, rook c8, betraying the idea that c4 might be an issue. The queen goes to a3 now. This is actually a very strong move because it's putting pressure on a7 and it's getting out of the pin. It's actually a really strong move. Knight a5, b3, and here black is under great pressure. It looks as though this is very awkward with d takes, not only opening up the d file, but this knight's kind of looking in the wrong place, and c5 is hanging. So we have bishop e7, a backward move, d takes c5, and things are really reaching critical proportions here. It just looks really, really dangerous, this position. For example, if b takes c5, then knight e5, and white is on d7. So this position, say taking here, it's looking exceptionally difficult to see how black actually defends d7, among other things. For example, rook c7, queen could even come to add support to attack d7. So it seems very difficult, this position. And against this knight e5 possibility, this pawn capture is not used, just f6, making sure knight e5 is not possible. But with the king still in the center, now bishop h3, this looks like another very scary position Paul Keres has got himself into. If he castles, then bishop takes e6 check, with that pin on the d pawn against the queen, is very good for white. So another awkward looking move is played, king f7. But there was also another strong alternative. Instead of bishop h3, it turns out here b4 is very strong actually. Around here anyway for picking up a7. But even in this position here, the move in this position was played with rook d2, but actually b4 here. And it might seem a bit strange, but this position here with queen takes a7 is dangerous, more dangerous for black than perhaps the game continuation. But white actually kind of lets black off that b4 forcing move with rook d2, and the rook's kind of a target now if ever b4 is now played. So after b takes, things are not so bad now for black. The moment has really passed. Rook fd1, d6, knight e1, and after queen b6, black has really sorted out many of his issues. We have queen c1, and in fact, Paul Keres is able to now go on the offensive. So what could have been a really awkward position with this b4, now this bishop, because of king f7, this bishop is actually a tactical target as well. This next move is really strong and attacking and direct. Can you guess what black just plays here? It's a pretty natural move. Just h5, just, yeah, use the rook on h8, blast open the h file. And it looks, of course, like this diagonal could be trouble for white as well. We have f3 shutting down that diagonal. h4, g4, this looks really quite awkward for white. Knight c6, this diagonal being weakened is great now for plonking a knight on d4. which is now what happens. Knight g2, knight d4. White is being really outplayed in a terrible way. If he takes the knight with the bishop, and then there's just e5 here, so white is actually faced with a miserable position. He sacks the exchange to bring his position to life, to get rid of that knight as well. After queen a6, we have g5, so white is trying to put pressure on e6. With the queen here, white's trying to coordinate on e6. But a clever little move, just taking this pawn, because now on queen e3 there's a resource, rook h6. So white didn't play this immediately. White played f4 though, trying to open things, but black just closes things with g4 and opens up the possibility now for h3. We have queen e3 hitting e6. This is just defended with rook h6. And this is incredibly dangerous, this diagonal now. If bishop takes h3, queen c6, it's just going all wrong for white, because then white's kind of overloaded. If we have a look at this position, queen c6, white's overloaded, or getting that way. It looks as though there's things, well, like just doubling rooks, for example, will be strong. So black, white just actually here moves the knight. It doesn't want to open up that h file. But we have rook g6 down. This is pretty scary, this rook and bishop and queen potentially coordinating. Queen takes h3, queen c6. Threatening to come into the position at some point, or in this position actually just deflect the queen with rook h8 for rook takes g4. So we have knight f3 blunting that diagonal for the moment. Queen e4. So this is on f4, which would then be on g4. So white defends f4. And with this, there's a possibility of bishop h5. King steps out of the way here. So the black king is now safe. The exchange up, basically. It's been a total disaster for white to arrive at this position. Basically, rook d3, rook f8. Black's still got loads of pressure now. This horrible pin and pressure on f4. Bishop e3, and now just e5. Yeah, just trying to wrench open things. If takes, then there's rook takes g4. So this is a very, very powerful move. Huge pressure on white. Pins here, pins basically here. It's just very, very awkward. Queen g2 is played. E takes f4, bishop d2. This is such a strong position. There's actually a couple of bone crushing moves. Well, they sort of lead into each other here. I'll give you 100 points for each of the two moves if you can see them that are really crushing in this position as a tactical exercise. You might want to pause the video here. These two weren't actually played. There was something else played. So I'll give you 5 seconds to pause the video. What would you play here with black? Okay, if you had said rook takes g4, this is really quite crushing. The bishop, the knight's pinned to the queen's attacking the rook, there's bishop takes f3 coming. It's just horrible, this position. There's also the possibility of d5 for bishop c5 check, just making things even worse. And they transpose into each other here, actually, because that idea can also be enhanced with d5 first, to open up the bishop for bishop c5 with rook g4 and queen e2 still. But in the game we see bishop d8, and white is able to now stop this exchange sack, which would have been dismantling basically. Now we have rook e8, king f1, d5. It's still a very strong position for white, not for black. Rook d4. We have check, bishop e1, another nasty pin. D takes c4, rook takes c4, and now the final move of the game was actually an inaccuracy. Bishop takes f3 was played. In fact, the best move is bishop h4 using the pins like this, the pin on the bishop and pin on the knight. White is basically had it here, is going to lose his queen if he knight takes, losing his queen. But how does he defend e1? In the game, yeah, remarkably, this may be a bit of complacency in a winning position. Bishop takes f3 was played, and white actually resigned. He could actually consider playing on here, because this actually weakens black on the light squares. Perhaps he'd become depressed with his position and resigned here at move 41. But actually, if white plays this, then bishop h4 is not just not winning, it's actually kind of losing for Paul Keres. If this was the intention, then it's actually losing. Can you see what white can do here? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. Okay, queen d5 check is just really annoying. If, for example, here, then queen h5 check, and then if here there's bishop f5 check, and then this rook's hanging, it's a disaster. And also, of course, it's hitting the queen, so we can just take the queen off after. It's a total disaster for white. And also bad is king f8, because then queen c5 check facilitates rook c1. Yeah, it's a strange one. It's a strange ending. White must have got completely depressed. So after bishop takes f3, resigned. Best, I mean, black technically is still doing great if he plays rook d6. So there's still some possibilities. Well, there's things like rook d1, and it's just a bit of a slower road to Rome, though. Eventually, you can install a bishop on e3 and threaten things like d2, but it's a longer road to victory. But this is important to try and pin like this the bishop, and this is a crushing position still. But yeah, it looks as though maybe Paul Keres did get a little bit complacent here when bishop h4 is really the most incisive move in the position. It's fascinating, in fact, to kind of consider this, that they're just human beings, even Paul Keres. And the clinical move bishop h4 was rejected. Just bishop takes f3 gives white some possibilities if bishop h4 is the thing, was the intention. But no, it's still black's in the driving seat if he plays rook d6 here. Okay, it's a flawed game involving Flohr. Early on, as I mentioned, that b4 possibility was also dangerous for black. Instead, white kind of stops his own b4 possibility by playing rook d2, which kind of makes the rook a target on knight c4s. But okay, the players were simply not as technically accurate, perhaps, as modern day players. This is 1950 after all. But there's some interesting ideas in these games, nevertheless. And Paul Keres, was the exchange up, and it looked like a dominating position. There were pins everywhere, and his opponent just became probably flustered after bishop takes f3 to resign. So it's an interesting one, with some controversy basically on the chessboard here for what both players could have done or not done. Anyway, comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.